Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show. Hope you're having a great day. As we welcome our listeners from the Mississippi Delta and the Jackson metro area, along with the Mississippi Gulf Coast, because it's Thursdays on the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I really appreciate you being here. And we've got a really good show. What I try to do on Thursdays is do a nice mix of statewide issues. We'll kind of dip into the Mississippi Delta from time to time, and then the Jackson from time to time. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about the coast as an economic engine for Mississippi. And I'm joined by someone who's just someone I worked with after Hurricane Katrina. He worked with me when I led the oil recovery efforts for Governor Riley over in Alabama. He's somebody I have a lot of respect for. He's the current CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council, Jamie Miller. And he's coming to us actually today from Jackson. How you doing, Jamie?
Doing well, doing really well. I am in the capital city. The weather's not great, but this is where I need to be this time of year.
It is, man. And of course, you know that well. I mean, if we could kind of look back in your most recent iteration of your career, the work that you were doing for the Mississippi Development Authority in that regard was a great sort of foundation to what you're doing now as the CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. It really kind of helped get you started in that domain, didn't it?
It did. After I left the Department of Marine Resources, mostly exclusively focused on coastal issues, the environment, and some development in that arena. Moving to the Development Authority really opened the door to some other avenues. Traveled the world doing recruitment and trade, but really got to understand the legislature, other parts of the state, what's important to different parts of the state. It really sharpened my, awareness. What's important to Tupelo or the Delta, as you said, or Southwest Mississippi. Each part of the state has different priorities. So it's good to have that knowledge when you're going to try to push an issue or advocate for something.
Well, listen, you and I chatted about this last time, but to have Bill Cork in the executive director position for the Mississippi Development Authority, having been down on the coast at the Hancock Port and Harbor Commission, in this moment is not only good for the coast, but it's good for the state as we, I would say, continue to knock the ball out of the park on economic development projects. I mean, one thing that Tate Reeves will forever be known as an economic development governor. But man, the work of the MDA now is just incredible, isn't it?
It is. The two projects that were announced this year had special sessions, AWS, the Amazon Web Services, and then the EV bigger project in Marshall County. Those are projects that were kind of being shaped even before I left MDA. But Bill and the governor, I have to give them both credit. They brought it to the finish line. Closing those deals, you really have to work around the clock almost, and it takes a governor that's willing to make phone calls and really press into the issue. So you're right, nothing can take that away from Governor Reeves. He will always be remembered for, I think, now 3 of the largest economic development projects that were landed in Mississippi, and to have Bill Cork at the steering wheel for some of those is been special.
Well, what's interesting about the way you talked about that just then, Jamie, and that is that while certain regions of Mississippi might be competitive with one another from time to time on specific projects and so on, the work that you have to do at the Gulf Coast Business Council with business leaders from across coastal Mississippi, CEOs from across coastal Mississippi, focused on making sure we're continuing to press the ball forward as it relates to strengthening this incredibly important economic engine for Mississippi that is coastal Mississippi, with Ingalls and Chevron on one side and Senate Space Center and the blue chip industries that are part of that on the other, and hospitality and gaming. Everybody knows the story pretty well by now, but it doesn't keep you from being proud of the rest of the state, because you know this better than most, that this rising tide, this economic rising tide, is going to be good for everybody, isn't it?
It will be. I'm confident that the AWS announcement, the $10 billion investment that AWS will make in the central part of the state, is going to trickle down to the coast and have a direct influence on our workforce in bringing and attracting talent to Mississippi. The Marshall County site, probably not as much, but the state is always better and stronger when we've got every part of every region of the state that's doing well. So I root for all parts of the state. We try to do our homework here and make sure that we're taking care of business, but I cheer for every part of the state.
I know you do, and I know that every CEO of Coastal Mississippi does, because it's good for us all when we all do well. Hey, let's just remind people, if you don't mind, for people in the Jackson metro area and the Mississippi Delta who don't really know what the Gulf Coast Business Council is. I was privileged to be one of the founding directors of it. We started it after Hurricane Katrina, but it's really become what we wanted it to become, hasn't it?
I hope so. It's had good leadership in the past, and as you said, following Katrina, it was led by industry titans, really, and community titans like yourself, that were just not going to wait and see how the recovery turned out. Formed this business council that led at least a lot of the conversations about recovery, pointed a lot of communities. It brought resources to the governor and our federal delegation to the coast, and that's continued to be our mission. We are a private nonprofit funded by our industry members. We have other nonprofit members and military, but we have an economic focus. And if you ask somebody on the coast, what's the most important part of the economy, you may get a different answer. In Jackson County, it may be Chevron and Ingalls. In Harrison County, it may be tourism and gaming. And Hancock County, of course, has that Anchor and Stennis. So, but every piece of it's important, and we have representation from each side of the state, from Hancock all the way back to Jackson County. So it's a healthy organization. It's been run well in the past. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to try to continue that, and so far it's been great.
And it's a big job. I mean, Coastal Mississippi, as you and I have discussed before, is you've got the 3 coast counties, and then you've got the municipalities that are part of that. And then you got the sort of the legislative division, so on. So the number of political subdivisions is incredible. So in order to be successful regionally, a tremendous amount of conversations have to take place, a lot of aligning. It's no surprise that you're up in Jackson as we speak, but a big part of your job, Jamie, is communicating, isn't it?
It is. I need to be informed about what's important to some of our industries and also our communities. As you said, 12 municipalities, 3 counties. Fortunately, at least my experience has been our mayors and municipalities have gotten along really well. They like to share information and help one another. Our counties have somewhat of a different makeup, but all serve in the same region. So I want to be available to our member industries. Obviously, I also want to be able to communicate to our local officials what's important to the private sector. And that really is what I've learned over the last year and a half is I've got to constantly be focused on the private sector priorities to keep a business climate and an economy in a direction where we all benefit. And so, yeah, it takes a lot of conversation.
There is no doubt about that. Hey, to give people a sense of how strong your board is, give them a sense of who your president is and just, some of the executive committee members.
Sure. We've currently got a 12-member executive committee. The chairman is the current president at Ingalls Shipbuilding, Kerry Wilkinson. We've also got, Hancock, John Harrison, Hancock Whitney, William Yates from Yates Construction, Roy Anderson, Chevron, Tim Potter with Chevron has just joined the committee. Ron Barnes from Coast Electric. I'm going to leave a few out, but I mean, if you think about the Mississippi Power, the more mature, what I call mature industries across the coast, their CEOs are represented on our executive committee.
Roland told me early in my career, and I never forgot this, that how do you become a leader in the community? Well, first of all, you want to get the people with the people and the resources to be part of your effort. Yes, that's why the big companies have to be part of it, because they actually have the resources to help push policy and community, events or whatever it might be that you need to be aligned around to help push that forward. And certainly the Business Council has provided that for the Mississippi Gulf Coast. You've got other organizations similar to this one throughout the state, but we take this one very, very seriously, and it has had a long history of success. And Jamie, you're doing a really, really good job. What I thought we would do is take just a second and just look at during this legislative session, there's a lot going on. I mean, you've got, coastal insurance it's not just coastal insurance. I mean, as Frank Bordeaux and I talk about regularly, it's insurance in general. And there are then the complexities of coastal insurance added to that, which make affordable insurance something both from a residential and a commercial point of view, something we got to stay focused on. All the conversations around Medicaid expansion. And then you've got, we'll always continue to be focused on the Gulf Coast restoration funds because of the, BP set that money aside, and we want to make sure that we're doing the kind of projects that are going to pay off in the future. Coming back to this legislative session, that's probably just those three big categories, but there's a lot to think about, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a new term, 4-year term, and so House and Senate had to form new committees, and I suspect if you got assigned to the insurance committee, House or Senate, you got a lot more than you bargained for when you started, because the leadership in the House and Senate have taken on some of the biggest issues we dealt with in some time.
Yeah, we will talk about that on the other side, and I give Jason White a lot of credit. He comes in, he's a multitasker, he's smart as hell, and he told his chairman, get ready to work, and they are working. Usually you have a kind of a lull at the beginning of the legislative session. Ain't happening this time, that is for sure. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Jamie Miller from the Gulf Coast Business Council. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. I have my friend Jamie Miller, who's the Executive Director, CEO for the Gulf Coast Business Council. That, as I mentioned and Jamie mentioned before, after Katrina, we formed this organization. We formed the Governor's Commission on Rebuilding, on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal. Haley Barbour went on a mission. We had a terrific executive committee. I had the pleasure of leading the tourism recovery planning part of that. And we developed a plan, and it enabled Governor Barbour to go to Washington and be able to very coherently describe what coastal Mississippi was going to need from an infrastructure point of view, from a other support point of view. And we laid a groundwork that became, billions of dollars toward our recovery effort. And as you may have seen or heard in my recent conversation with Fofo Gillich, it's incredible to think about, but infrastructure improvements in cities continue today. Some nearly 19 years later, we still are having conversations, and we're working on projects related to Hurricane Katrina, but that's how bad we were hit. And what we learned afterwards is that we were together somewhat. I was the president publisher of the Sun Herald at the time. We were together somewhat, still not quite where we needed to be. But after Katrina brought us together, we said we will never walk away from what we've learned from the storm, and that is that we've got to work together as a region in order to push the many, many, many priorities of this region so we can stay an economic engine for coastal Mississippi. And so, or say an economic engine for Mississippi. That's what I really meant to say. Jamie is joining us from Jackson. He's up there as we speak. And as we mentioned, the coastal insurance issue is a gigantic issue. In my conversations with Frank Bordeaux, Jamie, it becomes so clear that when you start looking at the reinsurance market, which is the insurance that insurance companies get, and events around the world and how that impacts the reinsurance market, and then you start adding into changes with the federal flood insurance program, and then you realize that Mississippi created this incredible wind pool, this backstop after Hurricane Katrina, which is a best practice in America, I might add. But when you look at all these complex things, just like it is with Medicaid expansion, you can't lift the cover on coastal insurance challenges and not get to a point where it's mind-boggling. I mean, that's just the reality, isn't it?
Yeah, I've lived on the coast my whole life, and it seems like a new challenge pops up. The reinsurance issue is just something I was never familiar with. We hosted a coastal forum last fall, and Frank was a part of that on a panel, and shared a lot of valuable information. But at the end of the day, what do you do about it? I think Frank's taken the lead on some legislation that would allow, public school districts, municipalities, and counties possibly to pool their coverage together. This is probably, I'm sure it's a much bigger issue on the coast than it is probably in other parts of the state. But it takes innovative thinking, creative thinking to rise to the challenge of some of these problems. But I'm pleased to see that there's at least 3 bills that are being introduced in the House and Senate that deal with wind mitigation programs, this pooling of public policies. So yeah, I'll be in the Capitol this afternoon, listening and trying to make sure that our membership is informed about what we want to support or maybe influence an outcome.
Yeah, I hope we can. Mitigation is a big deal, and we as you remember, we had you wouldn't think you would have an insurance committee as part of the oil recovery effort, but what we were trying to say is that the insurance situation in coastal Alabama and in Alabama in general was so critical to our resiliency. As we talked about, how do we recover from the oil spill? Just like how would you recover from a hurricane? It was an important part of the overall conversation from a resiliency point of view, and so mitigation became huge in those conversations. As you remember, it was a big part of the book that we published after the oil spill and after our efforts were done. But what's important about kind of where we are in coastal Mississippi is that the reality is there are some things that some things we can control, but there's a lot we cannot control, as pointed out by sort of the global nature of the reinsurance that insurance companies get. So mitigation is going to be a big part of that. And for people who are not on the coast who don't understand what I mean by mitigation, when I built the house I'm in now, which is literally next door to the house that I rode out on the water, Hurricane Katrina, had 10-foot waves hitting my house. It's a miracle we survived. But I learned a lot about what we needed to do. And Dave Dennis, a lot of people know Dave, ran for governor for once, been a big leader in the Gulf Coast Business Council. He's just a terrific guy. But he said, Ricky, when you build your house, which we did next door, put a commercial-grade metal roof on your house, use commercial-grade stucco, and use hurricane windows. And that advice probably saved my life. When we built the house next door, we decided to go to a gold standard of mitigation. What that means is that the roof is literally, with this long screw, it's bolted to the concrete slab. 150-mile-an-hour roof, 150-mile-an-hour windows, and a lot of other stuff. But Jamie, that stuff's expensive, man. It did take, and then it was able to affect in a positive way our insurance rates, but not everybody can afford that. That's one of the reasons why we got to be thinking about how can we mitigate in a way that can be affordable. I mean, it's a big conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of the issue is we know how to strengthen our homes. It's the cost of it. And you've got older homes that you're trying to retrofit into some higher wind standard. Coast made a lot of improvements after the storm. We improved our building codes. But we're to a point now that it will have to be some type of match program, some funding provided to private homeowners that can also participate. So we're interested in how they plan to fund the program. We think generally the program is a good idea, but how do you fund it? How do you execute on it? Those are the things that we want to make sure happen the right way.
On Medicaid expansion, we won't go into too much because it's frankly a very detailed conversation. I've had many conversations recently about it. I had a terrific conversation with the midday host, Gerard Gibbard, who at SuperTalk, who's done, he's a former tech CEO, entrepreneur, had a lot of success in his life, and he's dove deeply into this. He's read the bill. He's understood sort of what the challenges are. It's a complicated issue. It's easy just to be against it for political reasons and not dive in and really understand how Mississippi can benefit from this important debate that's happening in our state. And, I know that your organization and other really important business organizations are watching this whole situation closely. And, I think it's important that we have the debate in the state, don't you?
Well, we have to have it. We've been having it, at our kitchen tables. We needed to have it in the Capitol, which is happening now. Again, this took a lot of, I don't call it courage, but, this easily could not have been brought up in the session. But the House and the Senate both have come out and said, brought bills forward. They have approached the Lieutenant Governor's office approached the Business Council and other similar organizations like MEC and MMA. We are looking at it closely. I think our members generally support the idea of expanding health care to working poor and having hospitals more sustainable. And so there's a lot of positive things that just having the conversation have brought out. But to your point, it's complicated. I mean, their strong opinions about, that are somewhat policy related and then in some ways more politically related. So we're going to continue to watch it closely. I think we're likely going to have our general membership meeting in March, May focus directly on Medicaid so that we can get some information to our members and hopefully either support or have an opinion publicly about adoption.
Yeah. Hey, just a quick note. Gerard, as a former CEO, has studied it from that perspective. So you might want to consider. He actually testified to the House subcommittee or committee on this. You might want to consider having him part of that conversation because he thinks like a CEO and has really done his research. He's really, really adept at having conversations about the situation, and he's conservative. He's very conservative.
Well. Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. The challenge to have people come speak about Medicaid is there are a few that are not already have a kind of an opinion about it.
Yeah.
But I have listened to Gerard. He has studied the issue. I think he could present a fair case for why it's necessary and maybe things.
Yeah, I would. What's interesting is that he's doing it in a way where he's not drawing a line in the sand. He's just saying, you can't. How can we say no? How can we just say no? How can we not open up this wound for Mississippi that is healthcare and try to figure out how we can improve upon it? And he's, one of the things he says is that every legislature ought to have to go to the neonatal intensive care unit at University Hospital in Jackson, and see that the number of kids in there is sad. The number of kids that didn't get proper prenatal care and whose mothers were poor, and it's a tough situation. And you start to really understand what the problem is. And when you go to the neonatal intensive care unit and see it with your own eyes, you can't come out of there and just only talk about the politics of it. You have to say, okay, what are we going to do about solutions? So he operates from that point of view, and I think it's really, really good. The Gulf Coast Restoration Funds are something that we will continue to talk about for a number of years. It's money that was set aside by the BP oil spill money. And when we come back on the other side, we'll get the latest on where we are with the Gulf Coast Restoration Funds. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have my friend Jamie Miller, who's the CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. And we're just talking about a wide range of issues that I don't care where you live in the state of Mississippi, these issues are important to you because these are all about enabling a very important economic engine in coastal Mississippi to continue to be an economic engine, not just what it is today, but taking nothing for granted and not being complacent about anything, growing this region so it can be stronger. And boy, the issues related to being on a coastal community, whether it be hurricanes or whether it be potential oil spills or whether it be the Bonnie Carey Spillway, which we'll come to in just a second, we face some issues down here that other communities across Mississippi don't have to face, but they're important to you, very important to you. We talked about coastal insurance and Medicaid expansion, but we're going to chat just a little bit about the Gulf Coast Restoration Fund that was developed and has some legislative oversight as a result of the BP oil spill that happened here. So, what's the latest on the Gulf Coast Restoration Funds, Jamie?
Well, we're approaching the last 10 years of the fund's distribution to the state. When we're in this for context for this conversation, this is the state settlement that was $750 million. We've got roughly about $300 million, a little less than $300 million of that left in the trust fund. The process is, projects get put through a committee, a portal, but ultimately the legislature decides which projects to appropriate. And so we've got about 9 years now. I think the fund runs out in 33 to hopefully wisely invest the remainder of this trust fund into projects or programs that will grow the economy. So the Business Council from the very beginning always wanted a process and an outcome that were investments, not expenses necessarily, not deferred maintenance of infrastructure. These were all should be forward-thinking, regional transformational projects. That's not been the case most of the time, although there are some really high bright spots to point to. The governor appointed me as chairman of the Gulf Coast Advisory Board this past year, so I had a chance to help lead that advisory board through recommending projects. But ultimately, the Business Council is lobbying for, is advocating for what we call investments in projects that will impact the region, and to avoid these one-off deferred maintenance projects that really won't move the needle.
Yeah, so the point we're making, in fact, it's in the bill. We wanted to use this money because there was an economic damage that occurred as a result of the BP oil spill. We wanted to use this money in a way where we could make an investment and it would pay back 5-10 years down the road, and not spend the money on a municipal building, which there are other funds, other approaches to being able to do that. Not that those things aren't important, but to focus on things that will help move the economy forward. And, I would say that the fund got off to a little bit of a rocky start, kind of a mix of these kinds of things. And, the role of the advisory committee being somewhat confusing with what the legislature wanted, and it becoming sort of a legislative football. They could use it for their political, means. But I think, as the program has sort of matured and we've been able to look back at the kind of projects that have been funded, we can now look specifically at things that have really been used to give us economic payback and things that weren't used for economic impact. So, we've never done this before. There's never been such a fund like this before. So, you couldn't expect to knock it out of the park the first time. But there is alignment now, don't you think, around the kind of projects we want to fund? And I know that some legislators may have a different point of view about that. But overall, I think we're getting more aligned than we were before, don't you think?
Yeah, we are. There was certainly a learning curve among the legislature and the advisory board. I think the legislature in the last 3 years has paid much closer attention about how they fund projects that go through the portal. I've tried to reach out constantly to the legislator, the coastal delegation, about what the efforts of the advisory board have been to make sure they understand the work that we're trying to do to at least highlight the projects that we think will have a regional impact. So it's not perfect. No process is. And to your point, it's not that the projects submitted aren't important. They're certainly important to some of the municipalities and counties that may be submitting the projects. But for this fund, the purpose of this fund was to invest in economic projects that would grow the region's economy. And this program also includes the lower 6 counties. So you've got Pearl River, Stone, and George, which I don't have a problem with. They certainly are tied to our economy through workforce and education. So most recently, the Business Council has requested, or at least started a conversation about dedicating some portion of this remaining fund directly to the economic development agencies on the ground that are doing the work day to day to recruit companies, to expand industry. We think at the very least that is a wise investment. We made some progress last year on that, saw some investments with those organizations, and we'd like to see the same this year.
I think that is a great idea. I mean, these are the guys, these teams, whether it be Harrison County Development Commission or the Jackson County Economic Development Foundation or the Hancock County Port and Harbor Commission, they're on the ground. That they see these things. They see these opportunities. And it might be just one more incentive or one more thing that they could do to help sort of bridge the gap foundationally to help a project really kind of make it over the finish line. That's what you have in mind, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's exactly. We want to bring more tools, more funding, more support to our to the entities that we put in place to help grow the economy. So we want to make them successful.
I think that's an extremely smart approach to use, and I hope you're able to move that forward. One of the things when we started the Gulf Coast Business Council, we always had this dream that we would have a PAC, a political action committee, where we could support candidates that supported our policy objectives and our goals and our vision for coastal Mississippi. And, it took a while. It took a while, but you finally pulled it off. And how's the PAC going?
It's going really well. It's a state PAC. It's focused on statewide races and county and even municipal races. And so we've not gotten involved in any federal races yet. But we raised money through our membership. We contributed to candidates that we supported based on their philosophy and approach to, growing or at least keeping a business climate. We had public endorsements of, lieutenant governor and governor this year. So I thought our exposure, the way we executed on endorsements and our contributions made an impact. And it's a start. So we'll grow from there. We'll continue to raise money over the next few years, and then hopefully have an even greater impact in the next election cycle.
I think it has a dual impact. Not only are you raising money that you could use to help campaigns sort of, enrich their message and move their message forward, but I think symbolically as well, the fact that the committee, the Political Action Committee, which is an outgrowth of the Gulf Coast Business Council, if it's leaning toward, because you're not getting involved in all the races, you're picking the ones that are important to you, and if you decide you want to do it and people hear that you've done it, it makes a statement. It makes a huge statement. You endorse, Roger Wicker, and who can argue what Roger Wicker has meant to Mississippi and to the coast of Mississippi? It's a natural extension of when you bring leaders together. And again, you're not going to fight all the battles, are you? You're going to pick them.
Yeah, you can't water yourself down too much. But I think the important battles, and there's a lot of them, I think we certainly need to stand and make our voice known and have an opinion. Senator Wicker obviously has brought tremendous value to the Senate, U.S. Senate, and also Mississippi. Even if you just talk about shipbuilding and aerospace and the Commerce Committee, and he's the ranking member on the U.S. Senate Armed Services. So, we would love to have him as the chairman of that committee in the Senate. And he's just done a tremendous job, and those are the types of people I think our business community wants to keep in office.
There's no doubt in my mind about that. I can assure you, and his seniority and his leadership roles, when you match it up with the industries of Mississippi, I can't imagine there would ever be a better person than Roger Wicker. That's my personal opinion on all that. One of the things that you and I have really, really focused on, and just about every iteration of our careers we were on, is leadership development. We can't talk enough about leadership development, the opportunity to formally train people on how a region fits together and the complexities of a region, to give them experience. Experiential learning is great when you can really get involved in doing something substantive that we can actually implement, that would help, make the area stronger and help identify and develop up-and-coming leaders in coastal Mississippi. And the master's class has been just that for the Gulf Coast Business Council. What a terrific leadership organization that has been. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk about the master's class. We'll tell you the latest on the Bonnet Carré Spillway. And then speaking of the region, there's a terrific 10 regional partners have come together around a strategic initiative, and we'll get the latest on that as well. So we'll see you with more of Jamie Miller when we come back on the other side. A lot to consume in a short period of time with my friend Jamie Miller, the CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. We're just talking about all things Gulf Coast Business Council now. But when we went to break, we're talking about leadership development. The master's class of the Gulf Coast Business Council, developed many years ago, almost from day one, has been really important, hasn't it, Jamie?
Yeah, it's been great. I've learned a lot just from meeting with the class and going through the process with them. Last year was my first class. It actually runs through the Gulf Coast Business Council's Research Foundation. The Business Council has its entity itself, and then we've got the PAC, and then we've got the Research Foundation. But the master's class is, if you go to our website, we've got a history of the white papers that were presented that were prepared and researched to affect change on issues that were difficult for not just the coast, but maybe the whole state. This past class dealt with public advocacy and governance, and they ultimately wrote a white paper and gave a presentation at our last meeting to recommend a legislative scorecard. They thought transparency and a way of accountability in a fair way of our coast delegation would be one way that could inform our members, could engage our delegation. And so they presented a pretty compelling case for why a legislative scorecard could be implemented as soon as after this session we're in now.
Well, that's good stuff. Really good stuff. Listen, the Bonnet Carré Spillway, for people who are not from the coast, the Bonnet Carré Spillway, if you're going from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, you actually drive over the spillway. It's on the western portion of Lake Pontchartrain. And what its purpose is, there are other spillways as well, but what happens is when the Mississippi River gets super high and there's a threat of New Orleans flooding, they'll open up that spillway and spill the water into, this is water from a bunch of states that's over nutrified, with pesticides and fertilizer and fresh water. It'll come running into Lake Pontchartrain, then into Lake Barnett, into the Mississippi Sound. And Mississippi Sound is not made to have that amount of fresh water, polluted fresh water, come into fresh water. It kills oysters and does all kinds of damage. There's now a Mississippi Sound Coalition group that's been put together, led by people like Moby Solange from the Marine Mammal Institute and Gerald Blessey, the former mayor of Biloxi, and Robert Weigel, a terrific environmental lawyer from Jackson County. But they're doing a really good job of sort of pressing the Corps of Engineers and the court system to define, wait a minute, we actually have more options available to us around the opening of the Bonnet Carré Spillway than we realized. They're doing good work, aren't they, my friend?
Yeah, this issue has been frustrating to tackle, and it ultimately took litigation to get the attention of the Corps of Engineers and the federal government, and nobody has been successful up until this point to really have some small wins along the way. I don't want to call it an emerging issue. If we don't pay attention to this, it absolutely will be a killer for our tourism industry. We can't have fresh water in the Mississippi Sound constantly. In that spillway is not the answer to all the flooding issues that are happening on the river. So I applaud Gerald and the coalition. They came to our meeting and gave great information, and the Business Council will stay engaged on it.
So 3 years ago, the Bonnet Carré Spillway was opened twice in 1 year, pouring an enormous amount of that water into the Mississippi Sound that led to an algae bloom. An algae bloom, when you have tourism, ain't a good thing. It's not a good thing at all. It killed oysters. It did all kinds of stuff. But it's interesting. I had Captain Sonny Schindler on my outdoor show this week, in fact, and he talked about how the body of water is continuing to recover from that, and the fishing's been incredible. And he just hates the thought that the spillway would get opened again and we'd get set back again. We've got to stay focused on this, and thank God for the Mississippi Sound Coalition panel for being focused on that. And lastly, there's a lot more we could be talking about, but the fact you got 10 regional partners that have come together to develop a strategic alliance focused on the region. We don't have to share the whole list, but when you got the Port of Gulfport and the Port of Pascagoula and the Gulfport Biloxi Airport, the economic development organizations and the Business Council, all those organizations working together. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. That's another really important communication tool, isn't it?
It is. We wanted to start the year off with a bang, and so we asked our partners to come and sign a simple MOU saying, we were going to work together on those issues that are important to all of us, that we're already probably working on. We're going to communicate with one another, share information when we can. I think it was a great way to start the year. There's just no downside to communicating and sharing information when you have like-minded organizations that are trying to accomplish similar goals.
There's literally no doubt about that. You had a really successful meeting back in January 26th, kind of a legislative luncheon with strategic partners. When you start laying it all out, putting it down on paper, there's a lot to focus on, isn't there?
Yeah. And so the launch meeting was an opportunity to, one, invite our legislators to the meeting, and then have our regional partners share their priorities with our members so that our members could be informed, and then also with the legislature. So we didn't have enough time. We could have spent 2 or 3 hours in that meeting, but the point was to show our legislators and the coast that we are working together to grow, improve the quality of life for everybody.
Well, Jamie Miller from the Business Council, thank you for joining us. Good luck in Jackson. Tell your executive committee congratulations for continuing to do great work, and don't let up, my friend. This has been Jamie Miller from the Gulf Coast Business Council. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.